discussing the California solar mandate and quite a bit more on the regulatory environment and updates that are going to be taking place here in the next few weeks. It's kind of an exciting time to be in solar, and I'm excited to be joined by Bill Brooks from Brooks Engineering, and so we can start getting into this. And I hope you enjoy this lecture, and feel free to use the chat line for questions, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. All right, let's get to the next slide. So just in our agenda today, we'll be just introducing the companies, and then we'll get into this kind of a newsworthy thing. It's attracted a lot of attention, the 2020 California solar mandate coming down the line, enforceable really in the next couple of weeks after January 1st, 2020. And that may bring about some opportunities for training, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But then the meat of the presentation today will be on changes in the National Electrical Code and other regulatory changes on the federal and state level that are affecting our PV system installations. But no worries, in 2020, Solis has got a rapid shutdown solutions, a number of solutions for our contracts to choose from. And you can easily achieve the California solar mandate compliance with Solis, and we'll talk about the different ways you can do that. So with that, let me just introduce Solis. We are an international company, a global company. And Brooks Engineering, who has been working in the solar business here in the United States and abroad for over 30 years. Jinlong Solis is a global manufacturer. We are a publicly traded company, recently listed on the Shenzhen Stock Exchange, and you can see our factory there. We are the factory. We're expanding that factory, almost doubling it, coming up here in 2020. And of course, you can see PV all over the roof. I love that. And we are the first Chinese PV string inverter to have achieved that UL 1741 back in 2009. So we've been here a while, certified around the world, and generally a well-recognized Asian brand in the top 3 in different markets, India and in Europe. So here in the US, though, we've done our due diligence, and we've had our lifetime analysis done by DNVGL and our reliability testing by PVEL. It's good to get these kind of documents in place. It provides confidence to our customers and distributors, and we can provide these kinds of reports to ensure that you can your confidence in the U.S. product from this global manufacturer. But what we really are, one of the things that we think of as a product for the U.S. is our service. We've really developed a new service infrastructure. It's U.S. based, but it really is now spread to our company-wide, worldwide. And you can do online ticketing, you can do tracking, there's excellent metrics for response time, and we have a local team, an in-country team for execution of all of your RMA or ticket issues or troubleshooting with any of your systems. I'm kind of proud of the library we have online of videos and app notes and things like that to help you get through any issues you might have with the systems. And if we're not around, you can talk to our bot online, and you can even submit tickets to that. Good access. Now, I just wanted to mention the 3-phase products. I think much of what we're going to be kind of using as examples today will be the single-phase products, but I did want to show you that 125, we just come out with that. 20 inputs, string monitoring, some really cool things like IV scan functions and that sort of thing. Our 3-phase products for CNI, they all are kind of famous for that 4 MPPTs. But I really want to get to our residential products. On the next slide, I think that those are the ones that are really going to be the products that we'll see integrated into much of the mandates that those California builders are going to be subject to. And I guess the range is quite notable from 2.5 to 10, all integrated with a PLC signal generator now, and SunSpec Modbus certified. It's known as a reliable grid support inverter today. Next slide shows another product we have, and that's the hybrid. We are supply hybrid inverters around the world, and again provide a wide range of products. Our 5K, for example, can accept as little as 2K or even 1.5K of PV, so you can put in very small systems, small battery sets, and comply to the mandate very quickly. Of course, just like our regular grid tie inverters, this includes the built-in transmitter for rapid shutdown, all NEMA 4X enclosures for all these products. And then our last group of products that we sell are communication. We have that Wi-Fi stick and then this new cellular stick, really very touch-safe install, kind of cool. And our new rapid shutdown product, you'll note this works with our own, what we're calling a universal PLC signal transmitter in our inverters, because not only does it send a proprietary signal to our own product with a 10-year warranty, but we can also have it transmit a SunSpec type signal so it can communicate with other products in the rapid shutdown universe here in the United States. And with that, I'd kind of like to turn it over to Bill. Bill is, you know, from a long time in the industry. Bill, let's talk a little bit about the products you're offering into the market today.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can.
Good. Well, good morning and afternoon, everyone. Bill Brooks Engineering, and as Terrence mentioned, I've been in this field for over 31 years, and been a consultant for about that long. Helped start the North Carolina Solar Center in 1988, and was there for 10 years. Moved here in California in 1998 when California started their rebate program. I installed the first system in my community, and did a lot of, I've done a lot of training, was really the only trainer in California for several years doing grid tied training, and then a bunch of people got involved. And so I've been involved in consulting utility interconnection issues, helped establish a lot of the rules that are out there for utility interconnection. Rule 21 in California, was tech facilitator for that. And also oversaw the inverter list for about 8 or 9 years for the state of California, which approved all the inverters that were able to be used in California, which was kind of a de facto list for the country. Done a lot of training, nearly 20,000 inspectors, installers, and electricians over the years. And then also done a lot of manuals and articles, just finishing up an article for the IAI magazine. It's the International Association of Electrical Inspectors, that'll get published in the March-April edition, talking about interconnection of grid tie inverters with battery backup and electric vehicles and things like that. And I'm on Code Making Panel 4 of the National Electrical Code, and we oversee, of course, all the solar articles 690 and 691, which is large scale, and then 692 and 94, which is fuel cells and wind, and then interconnected power sources 705, which is I was involved in a complete rewrite of that article for the 2020 code, and then Article 710 on standalone systems. So that's just a little rundown. I've got about 300 clients over the 15 years that I've been operating as Brooks Engineering. And happy to work with Jim on Solis.
Well, we're sure glad to have you on this lecture. It's going to help, I think, our audience understand some of the issues and how they tie together, and how they can ensure that their systems are in full compliance. But really, this newsworthy thing is really what attracted me and really got me focused on some of the new changes that are happening. And it's, as I note, the CALSA is going to be giving a lecture on the 2020 California solar mandate tomorrow. Well, they're charging some money for that lecture if you're not a member, but this one y'all get for free. So I think it's going to be more than worth it. So this is just you see this chart a lot when you look up or Google California solar mandate. They're anticipating something like a 10% bump. You can see that there is a substantial home building in California in every year. It's quite. I didn't realize 120,000 almost single family homes will be installed, put in California, and they're anticipating that almost 50% at least will comply with this new mandate. That's a lot of extra solar being installed. And we find that to be quite interesting and maybe something that all of the PV contractors today can take advantage of. But we're thinking maybe this is going to bring in some other folks as well. The next slide shows that we think that not only PV contractors and even the big guys like Sunrun and Vivint who work with these builders are going to get interested, but we think the builders themselves might also start to get interested in solar power. I mean, I couldn't ask for more, right, Bill? I mean, we would love it to see that, roofing companies are getting involved in ensuring that roofing warranties are in place after PVs and that, standardization and packages by home builders are let's say, put in together with energy efficiency measures and really coming up with a kind of a new, better home. And this new mandate has allowed for both purchase, loans, or leases of these systems. So it's kind of open as to how these companies can interact with and fulfill their requirements under the mandate. But really what has happened, and it's don't think of it as some sort of mandate that's come down from on high. Really what's happened here is that the building energy efficiency standard has changed. It has been updated from the 2016, and now the 2019 California Building Energy Efficiency Standard will be in effect. And so this is where the mandate is and where it came from. It's really not just about putting solar on homes. It's about really reducing greenhouse gases in California, about really developing a new standard for energy efficient homes in California. And I think there's a possibility here that this may even bring about the return of passive solar architecture, which would be lovely. Better energy efficient homes, really even neighborhoods may be laid out so that they're more amenable to a PV system access, solar access, as we say. So I think it's kind of exciting and potentially could bring about some new opportunities for training in the industry, not only for PV system contractors, but also some of the trades that are involved in home construction today. Sales folks for the home builders will need to really learn the game. They'll have to learn how to sell a solar system. I think that there'll be some, they're being asked to put in maybe $10,000 in capital costs, and that's going to add maybe $40 a month to the mortgage, that sort of thing. But with all the energy efficiency measures in place, they should save at least $80 over similar homes without solar or these energy efficiency measures. So there's some attraction for this. And solar starter packages, I think, will be attractive to these home builders who are used to kind of upselling things. And I think the modularity of PV systems will be attractive to some of these sales folks because indeed you can start out small and build on that. So not only will there be sales training, and I think groups like SCI, do PV sales training, in addition to others, but I think there'll also be need for training in the home builder trades, that is electricians and roofers. In the next slide, this sort of training has been taking place for a long, long time and ensuring that the IBEW, for example, is up to speed on all the changes in solar and other parts of the code. Bill has been doing a lot of this work, and we're worried that maybe PV system complexity will seem like a barrier, and so that kind of training will be required. And so I think access to effective training is critical for the success for these home builders who are getting into the market and for always, PV system contractors know this already with their CE credits for NABCEP and other things. Bill, what do you think about this training opportunity coming up here in the 2020s?
Yeah, I think definitely there's going to be a need for training. I think also what this is going to do, the mandate will certainly raise the water on all ships, and there's probably about 20 to 25% of all new home starts in California already have solar on them. So we already know that there's a lot of interest in this area. And having had my power out for 4 days where I live recently because of wildfire concerns, there's also a real interest right now in California for what we call the all-electric lifestyle. So it's not an all-electric house. It's actually an all-electric lifestyle where basically not only does your house house heated and cooled with heat pumps and things like that, all electric, but both your cars are also electric. And that requires a pretty good sized PV system. It requires a fairly complex system, very smart, and that's where the future is going. So, you know, the setup and the training and the software and everything that goes into those things are going to be a major part of the next decade.
Indeed. I believe that too. Because we're not only talking about equipment. In the old days when I was installing, we would see the meter spinning and that would be the end of the job, and I could ask for my check. But today, really, the owners of these systems want to see their system on the internet. They want to see it functioning. They want to see it communicating with them. And so that's a big part of PV systems going into the 2020 is not only their functionality, but also their capability to communicate with not only their customer, but with the grid. So there's quite a few changes in the National Electrical Code and in federal and state regs to ensure this new communicative and grid stabilizing distributed resources like our PV systems. And so I wanted to start out with this stack. I like this. I got this stack. I'm not too sure where I got it, but Bill, I like using this because it kind of just shows the interoperability of all these and kind of how they work together. You can see on the bottom are those local codes where, you know, like maybe a AHJ wants you to install a battery system just so, you know, and then there's the state codes like Rule 21. And then you move up to the national codes like the electrical code or the FERC orders. And then up above that is the testing and certifications that you get to meet to ensure that the standards, which remember don't have any inherent authority themselves, but the testing to those, they sort of set the guidance for the testing that's done to ensure that customers are getting what they're paying for. Bill?
Yeah, this is a nice slide to summarize a lot of that stuff, and just the understanding that it does flow up or down, however you want to see it, from the local jurisdiction. Ultimately, wherever you're installing this, that's where the rules start, but it's going to very quickly flow up through the process. So the local jurisdiction is enforcing rules that are often regional or statewide. And those statewide rules are working off of national requirements, the National Electrical Code being the most universally adopted code in the United States. And then we have our building codes. And so we have the residential building codes, and California has their own version of it, but it's exactly, you know, pretty much the same. The California Building Code and the California Residential Code, the California Electrical Code are based upon these same codes. The adoption cycle for California is a little bit different than others, as well as New York State. So two of the largest states in the country and Florida all have adoption cycles that are somewhat delayed. And part of it has to do with the largeness of the bureaucracies and all that. But, you know, at the end of the day, the products and the equipment has to meet test standards. And those test standards are UL test standards. The UL provides or sets the requirements as part of a standards technical process and a standards technical panel. And I sit on most of the standards technical panels related to PV inverters and modules and all the like. and rack systems and things like that. But those test standards are developed through UL, and then certified with a variety of different certification agencies to that UL standard. So when we talk about things being UL certified, that's not really the correct terminology. It's certified to a UL standard. It might UL might have done the certification, Intertech may have done the certification, CSA, TUV, MetLab. There's several different labs around the country that do the actual certification verification.
And in the next slide, really, we're starting to get into really some of the terms and phrasing and numbers and other things that you're going to start to see. And one of them might be this 2030.5 standard. Now, this is it's a communication method, remember, and what we're trying to get to here, I think, is you've got a utility out there and it needs to communicate with these distributed resources. And essentially and it needs a language that it can, a common language that it can use. And so that SunSpec, you can think of as kind of that language, and you can think of the common smart inverter profile as just the equipment that the utility is talking to. So the utility needs a language and it needs something to talk to. And indeed, that's kind of what's being formed here. Bill?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. And so indeed,
okay. Hey,
yeah, I wanted to go from that to,
yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the NEC and how that process goes. Obviously, the National Electrical Code is the most relevant code to photovoltaic systems because they're electrical systems. However, the building codes have gotten on into the process starting in the 2012 building code series and up to the present. This is the most recent map of the United States for the adoption of the National Electrical Code. Everything in gray is on the 2017 code. You'll see that California is still in pink because until the end of this year, we're on the 2014 code. And then when we adopt what is called the 2019 California Electrical Code, that includes the 2017 National Electrical Code. And so, and you'll see that New York is, of course, on the 2014 code, and so is Florida. They're in the process of adopting at various levels. And so the adoption process is kind of not haphazard, but not uniform, certainly. And then Massachusetts is the first state in the country to adopt the current version of the National Electrical Code, partly because NFPA is located in Quincy, Massachusetts, and so I guess they have some pull in the state there. And also military bases and territories of the United States also can take on the latest version of the code at the adoption phase, which would be January 1 of 2020. So this gives you a really good idea. In fact, this is published by NEMA. That's the National Electrical Manufacturers Association. And you can Google NEMA NEC adoption map at any time, and they basically update this thing almost monthly, especially this time of year. They'll in about 2 weeks, they'll update it again, showing California on the 2017 code. And you'll get to see, and then there's an explanation paragraph that goes below that, which we don't have on our screen here, that goes into the details about some of that adoption cycle and all, which is very helpful to know when these things are coming down the pike.
Right.
So the next slide is getting into the 2017 NEC and the 2020 code. Now, we just published the 2020 code a couple of months ago. The 2017 code was a pretty large shift. I was heavily involved in the reorganization and rewriting of the 2017 Article 690. Where we pared down Article 690 from about 11,000 words to 8,000 words, which is a pretty massive change. at the same time, we also had a lot of new detail added in the rapid shutdown area. So we
Yeah,
were
look at how
actually
far I
adding,
had to zoom out to get this
yeah,
photograph, Bill.
just to see it. Yep, that's about 1,100 words. So there's lots of detail in there. So for folks, especially folks that work in California and other jurisdictions that are on the 2014 code, you're in for a new experience. There's a lot more detail in there. And also, we took out all the information about DC loads, standalone systems, battery storage systems that historically always been part of 690, and we put them in their own articles. So now we have energy storage systems, which is 706. We have standalone systems, which is 710. And then we have a new section of Article 705 for microgrids. Obviously, microgrids are becoming very much in the news, and a lot of discussion about those because of power outages and things like that.
Right.
And microgrids certainly offer a lot of really interesting things, and that became a separate part of Article 705. And we could have a microgrid that could be as small as a house, and we could have a microgrid that could be a neighborhood, or it could even be a small downtown area of a city. So microgrids are going to become something that's really interesting. And then there's a whole new area called DC microgrids, which is essentially direct current versions of those things, which right now we see mostly in manufacturing and all, but we will see those in the built environment in the next decade or so. And all that stuff was removed from 690. So yeah, 690.12b2 is really where everybody's got, where all the interest is. And starting in January of this year, there was a delayed enforcement of requirements that specifically related to reducing the hazard of the electrical circuits within a solar array. So previous to that, we've had rules in the 2014 code and 2017 code for reducing the voltage outside the array to 30 volts in 30 seconds. And those rules continue to be there. But then we have new rules about inside the array to reduce hazard, not to the same levels as outside the array, but to still pretty stringent hazard control levels, the most common of which is highlighted there in number 2, to curtail the voltage or to segment the voltage in the array down to no more than 80 volts within the array when the rapid shutdown switch is initiated. So when we push the button or flip the switch for the rapid shutdown system, most systems out there today, if not all, are going to reduce the voltage in the array down to 80 volts. And then outside the array, of course, will be down to 30 volts. And all that will have to happen in 30 seconds. There is coming up some other options. You see option 1 and option 3, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those. If we have a specialized rapid shutdown array, which is, we've used a little bit different term than that in the 2020 code, that's going to be one compliance option that will be available in the next year. And then there are definitely folks out there considering building integrated systems that don't use any metal parts and don't have any exposed wiring, and the entire system is more than 8 feet from grounded metal as a third alternative to meeting these hazard requirements. Okay, so this is related to the first option that we saw on the last slide, a listed PV array. The terminology that we're using in the UL standard is the PV hazard control system. And so a PV hazard control system is a set of requirements that include the modules, the equipment, the wiring methods and all that go into a system that place that system in a safer condition when the rapid shutdown switch is initiated. And that is a fully listed process. That standard is being completed right now. It's in the comment stage. Those comments, in fact, there was a meeting this morning. Been a couple meetings this week dealing with comments on that. And then it will be voted on in the next couple of weeks. And then hopefully sometime in the first quarter of of 2020, we'll have that as an established standard, and products will begin to be certified to it. And I would expect somewhere in Q2 and Q3 of next year that we'll see products listed to this new hazard control standard.
That's interesting stuff, Bill. Today, we're under the UL 990, I think it is, 991 for the safety of the rapid shutdown devices, and we would move to that new UL standard?
Not necessarily. So, so UL 1741 has an annex that references UL 990 or 991. That's a fail-safe safety standard, and so it has to do with the electronics. So the all equipment that is used for the 2017 and 2020 code for rapid shutdown is required to be listed as rapid shutdown equipment. So all the outputs and inputs of inverters, for instance, any kind of optimizers or switches used in the array, those type of devices all have to be listed for rapid shutdown. For instance, the Solis rapid shutdown box, that all gets listed to UL 1741 annex. There's an annex specifically for rapid shutdown equipment. That standard will continue to be used as the standard for any type of module level electronics equipment for the foreseeable future. Sometime in the future, it is possible that we'll end up essentially folding that annex of 1741 into this new 3741. It's certainly 3741 right now is referencing the 1741 annex.
Right.
But over time, those things will, you know, the attempt is to try to make this as straightforward as possible for the installer as well as the enforcer trying to figure out what is required.
Excellent. Now, I wanted to also follow that up with this FERC Order 841. Woohoo, another Fed regulation, right? But I do want you to take a look at that little chart down at the bottom there. Does that say energy storage market will surpass 100 billion? I mean, that is insane. We are going to see a real boom in storage. And part of that is because the national government has incentivized, or at least given us more clarity on the value of storage kilowatt hours. You can see that basically what it's come down to is that there is value for the actual kilowatt hours, and there is value for those ancillary capabilities that storage can provide for the grid, and smoothing and stabilization and that sort of thing. So just having that new order that really affects these wholesale electricity markets is a giant incentive for putting in storage systems into PV coming in the 2020s. So yeah, on a big, on a national level, this is happening, but it really is going to be affecting decisions that you make in your neighborhood. And while we're on batteries, I did want to just mention that 690.12 does not apply to batteries. So you need to, especially, I think, check with your local rules on the installation of batteries, especially in the next year or two. Look on the bottom there, you can see that the Contractor State Licensing Board recently voted to limit energy storage system installations for C46 contractors. This is, it's being contested. And so we're seeing some real local things happening with the installation of batteries as it becomes so much more popular. And so just understand that when you're doing shutdown, these rules for rapid shutdown in the code, we're referencing PV boundaries and these sort of things, do not apply to battery sets. So just check that out. I wanted, we went through we went all the way up that stack and back down again to the local level. And I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that in the PV industry, we really have a lot of great resources. Bill, the solar ABCs, they're still online, right?
Yeah, so this is just to give people an idea of what's going on. The solar ABCs was funded by the Department of Energy for about 7 or 8 years, which is about the longest the Department of Energy has funded anything in its history. And so, unfortunately, all good things come to an end because it's part of the way the government operates. And so, the good news is we've been able to keep those resources still online at the website solarabcs.org. Actually, it's not in here, but I should have added it. I work with an organization or a process called SolSmart, and that's SOLSMART, SolSmart. And you can go to solsmart.org. And although it's not a one-for-one replacement of what Solar ABCs did, it's a process whereby local communities can become certified as solar friendly, is basically what it is. And it requires a variety of things in their permitting processes and their zoning processes and things like that. And there are quite a bit of training resources, and I'm technical assistance with that. SolSmart is administered through the Solar Foundation, and so that's something that is available today. And there are over 350 communities around the country that are essentially certified as SolSmart communities. Also, we have PV industry, academics, and inspector communities all involved. We're encouraged to obviously continue to work with the NEC process, but we still operate what we call the PV Industry Forum, and that's a combination of an organization that I helped start called the PV Industry Code Council and the Solar Energy Industries Association. And we've been working together over the last code cycle or so. And we've got probably around 250 different folks that are engaged in that process, and probably 50 or 60 of which are actively engaged in that process, helping put together proposals for the National Electrical Code and for the residential code, the building code, and the fire code. So there was quite a bit of activity as we just wrapped up the 2021 code cycle for the building codes. Some very interesting and important decisions were made on residential battery systems and where they're allowed to be installed and how they have to be installed and things like that. So when we're talking about energy storage, it turns out that the building code is by far the more relevant code to battery storage systems, because there are restrictions on where you can install them. And everything, for instance, one thing to be aware of is that all energy storage systems that are installed inside of a residence must be UL 9540 listed, which is, there's only about half a dozen companies in the world that have that listing. And so,
that's important.
So something to be aware of when we talk about the hybrid product that Solis is working with. They have two partners that have UL 9540 devices, LG Chem, and they're actually UL 1973 devices that can become part of a 9540 system, LG Chem and BYD.
Right. And in the next slide, it shows just the banners for CALSA, and I encourage you to join. As I noted, they're highly involved in the mandate and how it's administered. For example, SMUD made a proposal for a kind of a different way to administer the program, and CALSA was the one that got the bodies in the room to talk about, give the solar perspective on that. And that particular proposal was turned down, but we're going to see some other pushback, and CALSA is your voice as installers to help organize for a particular mandate or a particular regulation that's going on down. So please think of them as a resource and consider joining their group to get involved in what's going on in solar, not only on the ground and on the install level, but in the regulatory and compliance world. So they're a great resource.
Yeah, just to second that, definitely. If you're working in California, they are an excellent organization. They are really carrying the water on these issues and in a very effective way with a very effective staff, and they're worthy of your support. I help them out quite a bit, just pro bono, a lot of pro bono work because they're worth it. And
I think so too.
I would encourage you, if you're working in this community, to support CALSA. They have been very effective, and quite frankly, the utilities in California are not necessarily all that friendly towards solar at the moment. It's not the environment is not hostile, but it certainly requires a lot of interaction. And without CALSA, we would not be in a good situation right now, and we got to still push for better regulations, better tariffs, things like that.
Indeed. So I want to start the last part of this lecture and talking a little bit about how, well, first we'll talk about module level shutdown to meet the NEC 2017 code that we showed you earlier in the lecture. And so on the next slide, you can see the new module level shutdown product from Solis. And it comes in a 1 input or 2 input device. Of course, it's certified to 991 and meets the NEC 2017 690.12 regulations, B22, as we highlighted in that slide earlier. And you can see down the bottom there, it's a PLC heartbeat. And actually, that's our proprietary signal going to our own manufactured product, the new shutdown device. We've recently run it through its paces. It's a 10 millisecond operation in the inverter, but about 9 seconds for it to shut down the array. And of course, this is linked to the transmitter that's inside of the inverter. And so for a PV string inverter setup like this, it really is just these two parts. It's the inverter with the integrated PLC signal generator, or it can be external, of course, as well. But in the case for Solis, it's integrated, and then the device is out on the roof itself. And you can see in our particular case, we're putting 2 modules to each device and then wiring the devices together. In the next slide, you can see kind of shows a bit of our compatibility, our capability to work with other products out on the market. And that's sort of the message that we're giving to installers here. If you need a 25-year solution, our universal transmitter, we're calling it, because it can do both our own proprietary signal and to our 10-year warranted product, kind of a nice 10-year warranted bundle there, 1 company, 1 warranty. And then you have a company that's able to work with AP Smart, for example. They have a 25-year warranty. This is, you would install 1 on each module here. And this is a nice way for, installers and distributors who are putting out equipment. Solis is a nice inverter to use because now you can pretty much have your choice of SunSpec SunSpec devices that operate with that communication protocol. So here is the AP Smart device. In the next one, you can see how really it's such a simple install. Essentially, you're just installing the inverter and maybe putting one of these devices on every module before you lift it to the roof, and then installing as normal. There's really hardly any change in labor requirements to install rapid shutdown in these systems. Here's an interesting device. It looks very much like the AP Smart device. It's a company called Z-Run Electronics, and they have some really interesting technology, actually. They are have been customers of many well-known PV module companies. But on the next slide, it's really interesting why we're interested in Z-Run is they have purchased the Maxim technology. This is a chip maker in the United States, and they purchased this. Maxim was working on a silicon carbide chip that would replace the diode and act as the optimizer. And now you're really talking about reduction of labor and of failure points, many fewer MC4 connectors on the roof, and excellent performance when you are doing optimization on the cell string level. So we're quite interested in following this company, and indeed they are compatible with our module level rapid shutdown and their devices today. And we're looking forward to maybe seeing something like this in the future. And speaking of module JBox solutions, everybody's familiar with Tigo, and they've upped their game recently with a new rapid shutdown retrofit device, very quick to install. And now they can't, our transmitter doesn't necessarily work with their gateways and things, so you'll have an external transmitter that will speak with their gateway on the roof and then provide the kind of, well, all kinds of functionality, including long strings and optimization and monitoring on a module level. Really, Tigo does it all. And this is where we're kind of trying to get to, right, Bill? This is what yeah, this is the new signage, and it's so important. Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a sign that is near and dear to my heart. I did the graphics on this sign,
All right.
so I tell you what.
Well,
if you give me a set of crayons, I can do you some graphics.
Those are some good lines, Bill.
But anyway, there's a lot of stories behind this sign, but basically this is talking about the signage related to rapid shutdown. And so all the new systems that are being installed on buildings, again, rapid shutdown is only for buildings, never for ground mounted systems or carports or anything like that. It's for roof mounted systems on buildings that are occupied by people. And so, so that's really the focus. And so this sign here basically just lets people know that when they operate the rapid shutdown switch and turn it to the off position, that then they're going to shut down the PV system. And in the process of doing that, they're going to reduce the hazard within the array, which is a new thing, again, starting January 1 of 2019, the requirements for inside the array. And the color of this sign is yellow because it's a caution. It's not a danger situation. It's a caution situation, but it is trying to get people's attention. And so this very simple sign was intended to communicate to firefighters. And so that's why we call them solar electric PV panels. Those would not be the terms that are used in the electrical code at all, or with knowledgeable people in the solar industry. We call them modules and we call them arrays. But nobody else in the world does, and so that's why we call them what people call them, and that's solar electric PV panels. I think most firefighters can understand what that means, whereas if you called something a PV array or a PV module, they would look at you like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So anyway, that's just a little history behind that sign, but these are the signs that would be on every building that had a rapid shutdown system.
So let's close out this lecture with some of the regulatory compliance marks and certifications that you'll see on Solis equipment to give you that warm and fuzzy feeling that this equipment complies with the latest. And you'll see both grid tie inverters and hybrid inverters from Solis that can meet these regulatory changes and the 2020 solar mandate. In the next slide, we have kind of a list of marks that you might see actually on your inverter. You can, on that lower right-hand box, you see sort of that small, hard to read list of certifications, but indeed you should check these out and make sure that you have not only IEEE 1547, which is really about grid reliability and managing and stability and that sort of thing, but also 1547.1, which starts to talk about these new smart inverter functions and the testing that has to go along with that. You should always make sure that your latest inverters have that 1741 SA mark on the inverter to ensure that these inverters have been tested for these support functions and that For example, those that ancillary services that these inverters will be providing using their batteries and commands from the grid. So you want to make sure that's there on your rapid shutdown device. You're going to see that UL 991 device today. And in many cases, you'll see that inverters are marked with a SunSpec logo or may even have an IEEE 2030.5 mark on them, but you might not necessarily see those, but certainly those top four. And in the next, yeah.
It's important to help people understand that you're not going to see these standards listed on the label necessarily. Some products might have them on there. The listing label will have a series of numbers and maybe a report number or something like that that you'd be referencing, and then there should be technical support and possibly documentation from the manufacturer that goes into the details of these certifications. Also, something to be aware of is that California is updating their inverter list, I believe January 1, and they will be wiping their entire inverter list and replacing it with a whole new list of the UL 1741 SA compliant grid support inverters. And so you need to be aware of that you should download these lists, make sure you have those lists, and make sure that whatever products you're working with are compliant with whatever the latest lists are. So
excellent.
Anyway, I interrupted you about 2030, and you can talk about the communication standard there. So.
Yeah, I mean, those are those international standards that we're all being tested to, but there's also national regulations. You won't see these marks really on your equipment either, but I did, you do want to, we're adding this new level of safety to these PV systems, and all of our installers now are confirming that that they meet that 2017 code after January 1st. So, you want to make sure that both your inverter is capable of operating with these new module level devices, or it cannot be installed. So although you're not going to see, NEC 690.12b22 or 2.1 or whatever it ends up being on your inverter, you do have to follow that reg, of course. And then it's not something you have to follow, but it's a new regulatory environment for batteries given this new FERC order. So all of you who are considering, new PV system installations in 2020 and beyond should start to think about those battery systems. And, that FERC order actually has already gone into effect. It went into effect in December this month, actually. So you can start.
Yeah, something to add to that, just to add to that context of the FERC order in battery storage, what's really driving battery storage in California are the electric rates, the tariffs.
Right.
And so the FERC order is very helpful to essentially make the utilities a little more friendly toward us because there is kind of the strong arm of the law telling the utilities that they should put together favorable environments for storage batteries, which is great, and that's excellent. What's really driving the economics in California is the fact that we have a pretty big spread in the cost of electricity from basically 3 to 7 p.m. Versus off-peak. That's considered on-peak in the summertime versus off-peak. And so now you're starting to get into the position where you really need the energy storage to store your excess solar in the morning because you're not getting enough benefit for that. And I know this firsthand. So I have two houses. My first house that I installed, the very first system in my community 21 years ago, just went off of its flat rate, and now it's on this time of use rate. And so my son, who lives there now, we had to put batteries on his house to actually make the structure work for him. And so there is a very real need for battery storage systems at all levels. Except for maybe very small systems, we're going to be putting in energy storage. And it's not unlike what happened in Hawaii, where in Hawaii, the utilities changed the regulations pretty radically and overnight it birthed the battery storage industry in Hawaii. We're
Yes.
seeing a big industry growing here, and a new area that I'm exceedingly interested in, which is called vehicle to grid, and which has been around. The concept is, but we're just now hearing people talking about making it part of the interconnection standards of electric vehicles. I just purchased electric vehicle this last week. I'm pretty excited about it. 64
right.
kilowatt hour battery in my car. You know, we're only going to be able to afford maybe a 10 or 15, 20 kilowatt hour battery in a house. But if we can add to it a 60 some kilowatt hour battery in our car during power outages, that's a pretty attractive world that we're moving into. So anyway, back to you, Terrence.
No, that's a great addition. And indeed, it talks about a little bit about how things are changing and adapting to new technologies. And, you know, Go Solar California is where, I believe that where that list is, right, Bill? That's what that you're talking to, that they're going to wipe. And so you got that link there that you can check out. And indeed, you need to make sure that, as Bill said, you need to make sure your inverters are on these lists. You know, make sure it's on the CEC list. You get their, you know, they're famous for giving you that efficiency number. And then the Go Solar California.ca.gov list to ensure that you've got Rule 21 compliant inverters there. Other marks you might see on the inverter might include that ISO NE. This speaks to how different parts of the country are engaging with and learning about and setting rules for interconnection into their grids. On the West Coast, of course, it's Rule 21. And you might, as I noted earlier, you want to check it out. Check out those contractor state licensing board to ensure that, you know, you're getting the latest information on energy storage system installation. So there's a lot of state codes. So we're kind of boiling it down from those international standards down to the national regs, down to the state codes and laws. And then finally, on this next slide, you see the tie right back to the California Solar Mandate and those local building codes that have changed, you know, now that we're into this new 2019 Title 24 Part 6 Building Energy Efficiency Standard. You know, there's calculators out there. You can see that latest standard. I gave you the link there. But really, this is how it kind of all ties back to, you know, everything's local. And so the mandate is going to be an interesting new local state regulatory change. It's going to drive some interesting new changes in the industry. And the next slide shows, I think, kind of a warm and fuzzy for me anyway, that the guys that I think are going to be affected by this, which is the California Building Industry Association, they're seeing how this new 2019, and I'm probably seeing that 21 code or teasings of it, Bill, and how energy efficiency and how statewide building standards are really taking a leap forward. And I think it's also cool that they're recognizing how CEC is working with them to, you know, to make sure that if they do dive into this battery storage thing, that they're going in the right direction. So I'll just close out with a short summary how Solis, you know, we provide a complete solution, and basically that's your install right there: one inverter and 6 PV modules and 3 rapid shutdown devices, and you are in compliance for very inexpensively. The Solis modules can, Solis inverters can take a very low voltage at high efficiency. Our complexity, as you can see, is relatively low there, and we think that's going to be attractive to new folks that are putting together packages to meet this mandate. We're priced very competitively here in the United States, and because of the few parts can be installed quite quickly. And I think that the closer for us is that we can bring services and training to these PV system contractors that are putting in these new communicative PV systems and the trades that are getting into PV because of these new changes in the building code. We think it's a bright future for solar, and especially for Solis going forward to meet these this very challenging U.S. regulatory environment, and we look forward to hearing some of the questions and some of the comments about these new changes and about the systems that we're going to be putting in.
Hey, Terrence and Bill, we got some questions here. What is the minimum solar size required?
Well, it's done by a calculator that's based on the square footage in your home and where you're located. And so I've run through the calculator a number of times on a couple of websites, and it looks to me as though there's not a real minimum size. If your house is very tiny, it could be a 1.5K array, truthfully. But a lot of them seem to be coming in, for a typical California home, somewhere around 2.5 to 6, somewhere in that area.
And another question.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bill.
Oh yeah, it's California has kind of been a big pusher of what we call the tiny house, and so yeah, if you had a tiny house, you could have a system might be as small as 1 kilowatt. So I don't know that there's any minimum other than how much room does it take to house a person, and then it goes up from there based on I guess a doghouse might be a 1 module project. So anyway.
And then Vincent Bartlett asks, I thought that some builders are going to put in 4 solar panels.
Well,
that could possibly be if they met the requirements. And again, I think that CBIA statement is that with energy storage and all, there may be an opportunity. Remember that's over a kilowatt. Might be a kilowatt and a half, and with some modules out there. So again, you'd have to run the calculator. It would absolutely depend on where it's located and things like that. And so rather than kind of making any kind of statements as to what those numbers are, those calculators are now readily available, and you can do the calculations yourself.
That's true. That's true. And in
we
theory,
are over time. We are over time, gentlemen. We can. We're going to have another webinar next month, and I hope you all will join us.
Okay.
Really appreciate everybody coming to this one. Spending some time with us, learning new things, catching up on the regulatory environment that's coming up here in just a few weeks is something we all got to do. And we surely appreciate you joining us, Solis, along with Bill Brooks, to bring you, we hope, some informational and hopefully profitable information for you going forward. Have a great day and a nice holiday, everyone. And we look forward to visiting with you on our next webinar starting in January. Bill?
Happy holidays. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.